The cake had strawberries in it. That's the only detail I can't shake. It was a sleek little thing, white chocolate shell, fresh berries on top. The kind of dessert they serve at upscale dinners where everyone pretends they like each other. I wasn't even planning to eat it. I was just watching. Watching him pick up his fork, watching her lean forward, laughing. Too loud, too easily. Then she said it. Loud enough for me, and only me, to hear. He's allergic to strawberries, she whispered, smiling. But I like to test how far he'll go for me. He didn't hear it. But I did. And I blinked. Because that wasn't something you'd say about your coworker, or your friend, or even your boss. That was a line you used when you owned someone. When you wanted to see them squirm for your attention. And right then, he smiled and took a bite. He winced. She bit her lip like she was holding back a giggle. No one else noticed. The room was buzzing with clinking glasses and overpriced conversations. I sat at the next table, pretending to check my phone, heart racing like I was in a hostage situation. She knew I was there. She invited me. It's just a company dinner, or something nice, she'd said, tossing me the RSVP like a leftover receipt. I hadn't even wanted to come. I don't do well in rooms where everyone talks about stock options and wine pairings like it's oxygen. But I came. Because she asked. Because I still believed she cared. That one sentence about the strawberries, it broke me in a way I didn't understand yet. Not just because it was cruel. Not because she was flirting with a man half our age right in front of me. But because it was her tone. Light. Carefree. Like it wasn't the first time. She touched his arm when she reached for the water jug. He didn't flinch. His fingers lingered on hers longer than they should have. And that's when I noticed something else. He was wearing the cufflinks I gave her last Christmas. The vintage ones with the blue enamel. My wife never wore cufflinks. The rest of the night is a blur. She gave a toast. Everyone clapped. I stood, somewhere in the background, a decorative husband in a suit that no longer fit right. Her eyes didn't find mine once. Not when she raised her glass. Not when she thanked her support system at work. Not even when I slowly walked out of the room without saying a word. No one followed me. Not even her. And that's when I knew I'd been erased. Neatly. Quietly. Just like the bracelet she stopped wearing. Just like the dinner conversations that died in mid-sentence. And worst of all, I let it happen. I didn't walk far. Just outside the banquet hall, past the polished marble floor and the oversized paintings of horses that probably cost more than my car. I stood by a coat rack that no one used, tucked behind a folding wall divider. That's where I listened. That's where I stayed. People assumed I left. Why wouldn't they? I was the quiet husband. The IT consultant who worked from the basement and never understood what fork to use. I didn't belong in a room with jazz trios and people who smiled with their teeth, but not their eyes. So when I disappeared, no one noticed. Not even her. And that made it easy to observe. From the sliver of space between the divider and the wall, I could see the edge of her table. Her back was straight, shoulders relaxed, head tilted just enough to feign interest, but not enough to commit. That's how she flirted, like she was always half distracted. It drove me crazy when we first dated. Now it just made me sick. He leaned in again. The strawberry guy. I didn't even know his name yet. I was too scared to ask her when she mentioned him weeks ago. A new associate. Kind of annoying, she had said, waving him off. You'd hate him. Hate him. I didn't even know the guy. But now I hated that I didn't ask. I had ignored all the little things. Late-night messages. The way she always smiled at her phone and flipped it face down when I walked in. The sudden change in wardrobe. The gym membership. The networking retreats, with no photos, no itinerary, and no calls home. And still, I wanted it not to be true. I heard her laugh again. Soft, measured, and unmistakably fake. She touched her necklace, another tell. She always touched it when she was lying. I bought that necklace. Small gold chain, single pearl, simple but elegant. She hadn't worn it in 6 months until tonight. Was it for me? Or was it part of her image? Then he said something I couldn't hear, and she leaned in to whisper back. He smirked. She playfully pushed his shoulder. That's when I pulled out my phone. I didn't record. I didn't take photos. I opened my notes app and wrote a sentence I never thought I'd write. I don't think she's mine anymore. It felt stupid, like I was trying to make a diary entry at a funeral, but I needed to put it somewhere. I needed proof that this moment existed, that it wasn't just in my head, that I wasn't overreacting, that my heart wasn't spinning stories where there were none. I stood there for almost 30 minutes, unmoving, listening. It got worse. The more wine flowed, the more careless she became. Her laugh got louder. Her hand stayed on his arm longer. And then came the moment that snapped me out of my haze. She said his name. Micah. Not like a coworker. Not like a friend. Like a secret you enjoy tasting. Like a word you whisper to yourself before falling asleep. Micah. That name didn't appear in any of the conversations we'd had. Not once. Not even in passing. And yet here she was, saying it with ease, with comfort, with a flicker of something I hadn't seen in her eyes for years, adoration. I stepped away. I couldn't breathe. The corridor was too quiet. I felt like I was floating in glue. I passed the restrooms and ended up in the hallway near the service elevators, where the real people worked. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past me and didn't even look up. He probably thought I was drunk or lost. And maybe I was both. But then something happened. I heard her voice again, but this time it was closer. Coming toward the hallway. I ducked into a side alcove, near a linen closet, and waited. Footsteps echoed. High heels. Hers. She was on the phone. No, he left. He wouldn't have stayed. Micah. You worry too much, she said, casual, breezy. Micah? She kept walking. I heard her heels click past the elevator doors. Yeah, I'll meet you at the garage. 10 minutes. I didn't follow her this time. I waited until her voice disappeared completely, then stepped back into the corridor. Everything felt artificial, the lighting, the air, the scripted smiles echoing from the ballroom down the hall. And that was when it hit me, not just that she was cheating, not just that she lied, but that she felt safe doing it. She was bold because she believed I wouldn't do anything. She assumed I'd just fade, disappear, go home, and pretend like nothing happened. But I was still in the building, and I had just begun listening. I should have gone home. That would have been the rational thing. But rationality doesn't survive betrayal. It doesn't operate when your spine is frozen and your breath catches every time you hear your wife say another man's name like it's been living on her tongue for months. So I followed. I waited a minute, maybe two, until I was sure she was out of sight. Then I moved quickly, slipping out of the back hallway toward the elevators that led down to the parking garage. My heart thudded in my chest, louder than my footsteps, drowning out every thought except one. If she lies to me tonight, I need to know just how deep that lie goes. The elevator ride was short. The garage, dimly lit with humming fluorescents overhead, smelled like oil and cold concrete. Most of the event attendees had valet parking, so the lower levels were mostly empty. Her car wasn't parked in her usual spot. I scanned the aisle. Nothing. Then I saw him. Micah. He leaned against a slate-gray BMW near the far wall, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a half-empty bottle of sparkling water. He looked comfortable. Familiar. Like this wasn't the first time he waited here. Like this had become routine. And then she walked toward him. I recognized her silhouette instantly, the way she tugged slightly at the hem of her dress, the confident sway of her hips. She didn't see me. I was crouched low behind a concrete pillar near the maintenance area, barely breathing. The lighting was low enough that I was invisible unless someone came directly at me. Hey, she said as she reached him, and he smiled. I thought maybe you changed your mind, Micah said. His voice was lower than I expected. Calm, cocky. She shook her head and laughed. Why would I do that? She replied, like she wasn't married. Like nothing about this moment required shame. Then came the part one wasn't prepared for. She opened her clutch and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. He unfolded it and read silently, nodding once. Then he stuffed it in his coat pocket. She leaned against the car beside him, and for a few moments, it just stood there. Quiet. Together. Content. Whatever was written on that paper, it wasn't innocent. He wrapped an arm around her waist, and she let him. No hesitation. No guilt. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She wasn't pretending. She was herself with him in a way I hadn't seen in years. Maybe ever. I felt like I'd swallowed a brick. They didn't kiss. Not then. But they didn't have to. The closeness was louder than any kiss. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder. He rubbed her back. And then she said, I'll call you later, okay? And walked toward the exit stairwell. Micah stayed a moment longer, looking down at the paper she'd given him. Then he smiled, a smug, satisfied smile that made my hands curl into fists. He got in his car and drove off. I waited until the garage was empty. When I emerged, I didn't know where I was going. My legs moved before my mind did. I wasn't crying. Not yet. My body was too cold for that. But I kept replaying her words from earlier. He's allergic to strawberries, but I like to test how far he'll go for me. And now this. The paper. The meeting. The quiet goodbyes. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan. And I was standing on the outside of it like some uninvited ghost. When I finally made it back to my car, I didn't turn the engine on right away. I sat in the dark with the keys in my hand, staring at the steering wheel, wondering what exactly I'd become in her eyes. Background. Furniture. Placeholder. She knew I wasn't supposed to see any of this. But now that I'd watched it unfold in silence, the next move was mine. And that scared me more than anything else. The house was dark when I got back. Only the porch light was on, flickering slightly like it couldn't decide whether to burn out or keep fighting. I walked in through the back door, as quietly as possible, like I was sneaking into someone else's home. The air smelled like her perfume, not the one she used to wear for me, but the newer one, the one she'd started using around the same time those networking events began. I sat on the edge of the couch for a while, not moving, coat still on. I think I was waiting to hear her key in the lock, waiting to see what version of herself she'd bring home tonight. The cheerful liar, the distracted stranger, or maybe the tired wife who still remembered how to ask me how my day went. But she didn't come home right away, and that silence gave me time to do something I hadn't planned: check her laptop. It was sitting on the dining table, plugged in, lid halfway closed. For a moment, I just stared at it. I'd never gone through her things before, not once in all the years together, not even when the lies started to feel sticky. I always gave her the benefit of the doubt. I thought that made me noble. In hindsight, maybe it just made me easy to manipulate. When I lifted the screen, it came to life without needing a password. She must have forgotten to log out. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I found it. There was a folder on the desktop labeled Marketing Q3. I clicked it because it seemed too normal, too deliberate. Inside were 6 documents and 1 video. The docs were boring: spreadsheets, media kits, calendar layouts. But the video was named Tuesdays_Micah. No date, just that. I stared at it for a long time before moving the mouse. My stomach clenched as I hit play. At first, it was blurry. A hotel room. Beige walls. Dim lighting. The sound of shoes being kicked off. Laughter, the kind of laughter you don't fake. And then I saw her. On the screen. Tossing her purse onto the bed. Unzipping her dress like she'd done it 100 times before. And there he was too. Micah. Filming with one hand. Walking toward her like this was a celebration. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't need to. Just 10 seconds was enough. I slammed the laptop shut, so hard it nearly slid off the table. I stared at it like it had betrayed me, like it had reached out and punched me square in the chest. And then I got angry. Not loud angry. Not shouting, throwing, breaking stuff angry. The quiet kind. The kind that bubbles in your throat and makes your hands tremble. The kind that whispers she really did it. And worse, she didn't care if you found out. That was the part one couldn't shake. The carelessness. The lack of effort to hide it. She hadn't even deleted the file. That meant she either thought I'd never look, or she wanted me to see it. I left the laptop right where it was. I walked upstairs and sat on the edge of our bed. The same bed where we used to plan vacations, name baby names, argue about what side of the closet I was allowed to invade. I sat there staring at the wall until I heard her car pull up outside. When the door opened downstairs, she didn't say anything. Just the sound of heels being kicked off, her bag hitting the floor. She wasn't trying to be quiet. She never did when she assumed I'd be asleep. But tonight, I didn't want to confront her. Not yet. I needed to see how deep this rabbit hole went. I needed to know if I was living in the same world as her or just orbiting a reality she abandoned a long time ago. So I laid down, closed my eyes, and pretended to sleep. She entered the room 5 minutes later, humming softly. Maybe she was still high off whatever fake romance she'd just lived through. She brushed her teeth, changed into pajamas, climbed into bed next to me like nothing happened. And then, without hesitation, she kissed my cheek. That same mouth, that same voice, the same hand that just caressed another man. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Good night." I didn't move. I didn't say a word. But I didn't sleep at all. The morning after was colder than it should have been. Not just the temperature, the silence had a chill of its own. It clung to the walls, to the mirror fogged from her shower, to the untouched breakfast toast she left sitting on the plate like a peace offering I didn't ask for. I sat at the kitchen table in the same clothes I wore the night before. I hadn't moved much. Just enough to look like I still belonged in the rhythm of our house. She was in a rush, pretending to be late for work. She made a show of rifling through her purse, grabbing her coffee-to-go mug, kissing me lightly on the head again, as if her lips hadn't whispered another man's name hours earlier. Her voice was cheerful, too cheerful, like she was performing in a play I never auditioned for. "You good, babe?" she asked as she slung her bag over her shoulder. I nodded. "Yeah, just tired." She paused for a fraction of a second, like she wasn't sure if I meant it. Then smiled and said, "We'll do something this weekend, okay? Just us." "Sure," I said, already knowing she wouldn't be there. When the door clicked shut behind her, I exhaled so hard it felt like I'd been holding my breath since the garage. I didn't waste time. I went straight upstairs and pulled out a duffel bag from under the bed. I wasn't running away, not yet. But I was preparing. Preparing for whatever version of the truth she'd try to spin once I told her what I knew. Preparing for the unraveling of everything I had let fester too long in silence. I started with the essentials. Not clothes. Not toiletries. Evidence. I opened the laptop again, this time with gloves on. It sounds paranoid, but I didn't want my prints on anything she might later claim was doctored or out of context. I copied the video and every suspicious-looking file onto a flash drive I kept in my old toolbox. Then I opened her email. And that's when it got worse. There weren't hundreds of messages. Just a few. But they were enough. Enough to make my hands sweat. Enough to make my vision blur with rage. One thread, in particular, caught my eye. Subject line, "Sunday night confirmed?" Micah had written, "Got the room. Same place. I'll bring wine. Tell him you're visiting your sister again." Her reply, "LOL. He never questions it. See you soon." There it was. The truth, in black and white. I didn't even have to scroll further. But I did. Because pain is addictive. And because I needed to feel it fully before I could decide what to do. More emails, more meetups, talk of rescheduling our escape plan, a half-written resignation letter she never sent, addressed to her company's HR, filled with lines like, "Ready to start a new chapter and pursue a more personal path." A new chapter? Without telling me? I closed the laptop and stared at the wall, heart racing. My palms were clammy. I knew I had to get out of the house for a few hours. I couldn't sit there with the weight of her betrayal pressing against the ceiling. So I left. I didn't take my car. I walked. For blocks. I passed the cafe where we had our first awkward breakfast together. I passed the bookstore where she once surprised me with a signed first edition of a novel I loved. I passed all the landmarks of our history, now reduced to props in a story she'd already rewritten without me. Eventually, I found myself sitting on a bench in front of a quiet lake. No ducks. No kids. Just water and wind. And that's when I did something I still don't know how to feel about. I called her sister. I hadn't spoken to Brina in months. We'd never been close, but she always liked to joke that I was too patient for my own good. When she picked up, her voice was confused but polite. "Tom? Everything okay? I didn't waste time. When was the last time Callie visited you?" She was quiet for a second. Christmas. Not since then." "No. Why?" I thanked her and hung up. I didn't need to say more. The lie about visiting her sister, the one Callie had used more than once, had crumbled in a single sentence. And now, there was no going back. The bag was packed. The evidence was saved. The web of deceit was no longer a theory. It was real. And so was the anger building in my chest. I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Not face to face. Not with the mix of disgust, grief, and pure disbelief still pumping through my veins like venom. So instead, I bought a burner phone. It felt ridiculous at first. I walked into a corner store 3 neighborhoods away, paid in cash, and left with a prepaid box and a brown paper bag like I was about to pull off a heist. But it wasn't about deception. It was about truth. And I knew the only way I'd get it from her was if she didn't know it was me. Back home, I waited until I knew she was in the middle of her usual afternoon meeting, the one she always took from her car in the company lot so she could stretch her legs. I created a new contact, unknown 555, and sent a single message. "You free this Sunday or still pretending to visit your sister?" No name. No context. Just bait. I thought she'd ignore it. I thought maybe she'd be scared enough to block the number or call me in a panic. But it didn't take her long to respond. Exactly 8 minutes later, the screen lit up. "Who is this?" I waited 5 more minutes, then followed up with, "You know who?" Another pause. Then this. "Can't talk RN. Meet same place." I stared at the message like it had physically hit me in the chest. She had no idea who she was talking to, but she had someone in mind. And she was willing to confirm the meeting anyway, without a name, without a call, without a shred of hesitation. just defaulted to deceit. And that's when it clicked for me. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't one affair. This was a system. A whole operation of lies woven into her calendar, her body language, her fake smiles at dinner, the way she'd kiss me goodbye on her way to someone else. And the most haunting part? She'd become fluent in it. I dropped the phone into my pocket and stood motionless in the center of the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed behind me. The clock ticked. Everything in the room felt falsely still, like a stage after the curtain falls. But you know the actors are still hiding just off stage, whispering. I opened the fridge. I needed something, anything to keep my hands moving. I grabbed a soda, popped it open, and saw something that made me freeze. 2 tickets on the corkboard near the pantry, pinned with a heart-shaped magnet. I hadn't noticed them before. Sunset wine tasting, Willow Park, 6 p.m. Sunday. 2 tickets. Reserved under her name. But she hadn't told me about it. And I wasn't invited. The dots connected fast and hard. Same place, she had texted. Sunday. A networking event. The wine tasting wasn't for us. It was their next date. I pulled one of the tickets off the board and held it like evidence in a crime scene. Because that's what it was now. A crime of slow, deliberate erasure. Not a crime the law would punish, but one that had left me with invisible bruises all over my soul. And still, part of me wanted to believe I'd misunderstood. That maybe I was making connections that didn't exist. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. So I decided to test her one last time. That evening, as she came through the door with her usual bag of excuses and half-smiles, I didn't ask about her day. I didn't mention the burner phone. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I said, "Hey, I saw a flyer for a wine tasting this weekend. Want to check it out?" Her body stiffened, just slightly. She reached down to undo her shoes, her face angled away from mine. "Which one?" she asked, voice too casual. "Willow Park. Sunday evening." She chuckled. "Ugh, that place? We went there once, remember? You hated it." I nodded. "Yeah, but figured we could give it another try." She didn't look up. "Actually, I told my sister I'd visit her that day. She's been feeling off." I let that silence sit between us like a landmine. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just being lied to. I was being played. And the game? It was almost over. I didn't sleep the night before. I didn't even try. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing beside me, wondering how many more lies she'd fed me in that very room. Every inhale felt like a countdown. Every shift of her body under the blanket sounded like a ticking bomb. I could feel the wine tickets burning inside the drawer by my side of the bed. I tucked them there like a secret, but not the kind you hide out of guilt. The kind you protect until the right moment comes to use it as a blade. By morning, my mind was clear. No more guessing. No more hoping. I wasn't going to confront her in the kitchen, or over text, or in some parking lot screaming like a fool. That wasn't me. She'd expect emotion. She'd expect me to fold. I needed her to know what it felt like when she lost control. So I called someone I hadn't talked to in nearly 2 years, Paul. Paul used to be one of my closest friends, but we'd grown apart when life got noisy, jobs, marriages, time. We reconnected briefly when his divorce happened, but it faded fast. Still, he was the kind of guy who remembered loyalty. He picked up after 2 rings. "Tom?" he said, surprised. "Yeah," I answered, voice shaking slightly. "You busy Sunday night?" He hesitated. "I can be free. What's going on?" I told him everything. Not the soft version. The real thing. I didn't dramatize or sugarcoat. I laid it all out. The video, the emails, the burner phone, the lie about her sister, the wine tickets on the fridge. Paul was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I'll drive." Sunday came too fast. I played it cool the entire morning. Callie got dressed in her weekend casual outfit, which, of course, looked effortlessly curated. She packed an overnight bag, made a show of texting her sister about arrival times, and kissed me on the cheek. "You sure you'll be okay here?" she asked sweetly, like she was leaving me home with the flu. "I've got some work to catch up on," I said with a smile that felt like acid in my throat. "Tell Brina I said hi." She paused. Just a flicker, like a shadow passed over her eyes. Then it was gone. By the time she pulled out of the driveway, Paul was already around the corner waiting for me. I jumped into the passenger seat with my hoodie up and my stomach doing backflips. I wasn't sure what I was going to find at Willow Park, but I knew I had to see it with my own eyes. The drive was mostly silent. Paul could sense I wasn't ready to talk. When we arrived, the parking lot was half full. Couples walked toward the entrance in muted laughter and soft conversation. Everyone looked like they belonged there. I didn't. We kept our distance. I didn't want to storm in. I wanted to observe. And then, there she was. Callie. She walked in from the opposite side of the lot, hand in hand with Micah. Not arm in arm. Not standing apart like co-workers. Hand in hand. Fingers intertwined like teenagers, like they had no one to answer to. She was wearing the scarf I gave her for our anniversary trip to Vermont, the one she said she lost last winter. I felt my pulse explode in my ears. Paul looked at me. You want to go in? Not yet, I said. Let them settle. We waited 10 more minutes before walking up to the entrance. I asked Paul to hang back. I wanted her to see me alone. Not angry. Not yelling. Present. The woman at the welcome desk smiled as I handed over the ticket. I didn't smile back. Inside, the place was warm and golden lit, buzzing with couples holding wine glasses and murmuring over cheese pairings. I scanned the room until I found them. Corner table. Intimate spot by the window. She was laughing again. That same laugh I once thought was only mine to earn. Her fingers were resting on Micah's knee under the table. And then she saw me. Her whole face dropped. She froze mid-sentence, like someone had unplugged her soul. Micah turned to look at me too, confusion on his face. He clearly didn't recognize me at first. I didn't move toward them. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching, letting her feel every inch of exposure. Every ounce of fear that comes from being truly seen. Then I slowly raised my hand and pointed to my pocket. She knew what I meant. The flash drive, the emails, the video. Her expression turned to panic. I turned around and walked out. No scene, no shouting, no public drama, just silence, the kind that haunts. And behind me, I swear I heard her whisper, "Oh my God." I didn't go home right away. I needed air, not the kind that sits trapped in your car with the weight of what just happened, but the kind that feels endless. Paul drove in silence while I stared out the window, watching the trees blur into colorless streaks. We stopped at a quiet overlook about 10 miles outside of town, where the hills dropped into a valley and the sunset smeared the sky with orange and violet. I stepped out, stood at the edge of the lot, and let the wind hit my face. I had just shattered something that had been rotting for months, maybe years. And now, standing there, I didn't feel broken. I felt emptied, but not in a bad way. More like when you finally clear out a room full of junk and realize there's space to breathe. Paul stood beside me, arms folded, not saying much. He didn't have to. I don't know what happens next, I finally said. You don't have to, he replied. You just have to not go back to what almost killed you. I nodded slowly. That night, I didn't go back to the house. I stayed at Paul's place, curled up on his lumpy couch under an old fleece blanket, unable to sleep but too exhausted to care. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off, and for the first time in months, I didn't dream of her. The next morning, I returned. The house was quiet. Her car was still gone, but she had been there. The wine-stained scarf was on the floor near the front door, crumpled like a discarded story. She'd left a note on the kitchen table. It was short. I don't know what to say. I know you saw everything. I won't make excuses. I'll give you space, and whatever you decide, I won't fight it. No, I'm sorry. No begging. Just the barest acknowledgement of the truth I'd already lived through. I didn't need more. I didn't want an apology written in ink. I needed one written in action. So I did what I had to do. I emailed my lawyer. I forwarded the files. I printed the emails and filed for divorce the next day. And then, I started over. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But I stopped sleeping in the bed we shared. I painted the living room a different color. I threw out the couch we bought during a Black Friday sale when she still laughed at my terrible taste in pillows. I canceled streaming services she liked and kept the ones she hated. Small rebellions that helped me reclaim the space inch by inch. Weeks passed, then months. And one afternoon, while standing in line at a local bakery, I met someone. Not the kind of meeting that explodes with fireworks or cheesy fate. It was quiet. Simple. She dropped her bag. I picked it up. She smiled. We talked. Her name was Elise. She didn't remind me of Callie. Not at all. And that was the best part. Her eyes were gentle in a way that didn't ask for anything. Her laugh was awkward and unpolished, and I liked that it wasn't rehearsed. We started getting coffee on Sundays. Then walks. Then dinners. I didn't tell her about Callie right away. I didn't want her to feel like a rescue boat. But when I did, she just listened. No judgment. No questions. Just quiet understanding. And for the first time, I felt safe again. Not because I had found someone new, but because I had finally chosen myself. This story didn't end with revenge. There were no explosions or dramatic public takedowns. Just truth. Quiet, powerful truth that refused to stay hidden. And that was enough. I walked away from betrayal and walked towards something better.